Reagan tollway is heavy approaching the Eisenhower as well. That's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. AM 560 Weather Center forecast with our AccuWeather meteorologist, Steve Williams.
Partly sunny, terrific day. The high today at 80. Tonight, partly cloudy, low 64. Periods of clouds and sun. Humid day tomorrow, the high 83. Sun and clouds, afternoon thunderstorm on Wednesday. The high Wednesday at 86. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
63 at O'Hare, 66 along the lakefront, 56 this morning in Aurora. Your next news update is at 7:30. And Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
From the Matrix Home Solutions Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Vice President Kamala Harris back in April said she was the last person in the room before Joe Biden made the decision to pull U.S. troops out of Afghanistan. I've seen him over and over again make decisions based on exactly what he believes is right. Hey, don't worry, Kamala. There's plenty of credit to go around here. In July 8th to be specific, Joe Biden had this to say about his decision and his assessment of the likelihood of a Taliban takeover as soon as U.S. troops were removed.
Is a Taliban takeover of Afghanistan now inevitable?
No, it is not. Because you have the Afghan troops have 300,000 well-equipped as any army in the world, and an air force against something like 75,000 Taliban. It is not inevitable.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Your own intelligence community has assessed that the Afghan government will likely collapse.
That is not true.
Can you please clarify what they have told you about whether that will happen or not?
That is not true. They did not reach that conclusion.
Well, Representative Mike McCall, the ranking Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, says the intelligence estimates that he has read reach exactly that conclusion, and this despite the pronouncements, and this is a couple of weeks later after you heard from Biden, then you send out your politician general, Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to say the same thing, to say that Afghan forces have the capacity to fight and defend the country. There's a range of possible outcomes in Afghanistan. A negative outcome, a Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, is not a foregone conclusion because, he said, the Afghan security forces are adjusting forces to consolidate forces into the provincial capitals in Kabul. It remains to be seen what will happen. I don't think the end game is yet written. That was 3 weeks ago. For more on all, but one more before we forget. So now we got to fast forward to present as of yesterday when you've got Saigon Redux at the airport in Kabul. You've got people trying to cling to the wheels of a C-17, and apparently 2 stowaways fell out of the sky to their death. This was Tony Blinken on the Sunday Talkies explaining the administration's position and reaction to what transpired over the weekend.
Under no circumstance, and that was his word, those were his words, under no circumstance would the U.S. personnel, embassy personnel, be airlifted out of Kabul in a replay of the scenes that we saw in Saigon in 1975. So isn't that exactly what we're seeing now? I mean, even the images are evocative of what happened in Vietnam.
Let's take a step back. This is manifestly not Saigon. The fact of the matter is this. We went to Afghanistan 20 years ago with one mission in mind, and that was to deal with the people who attacked us on 9/11. And that mission has been successful. We brought bin Laden to justice a decade ago. Al-Qaeda, the group that attacked us, has been vastly diminished. Its capacity to attack us again from Afghanistan has been, right now, does not exist. And we're going to make sure that we keep in place in the region the capacity, the forces necessary to see any reemergence of a terrorist threat and to be able to deal with it. So in terms of what we set out to do in Afghanistan, we've done it.
I mean, just lies and more damn lies. I mean, all day long, the Chinook helicopters were taking Americans out of the embassy to the airport.
Mission accomplished? ? We'll put it to Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullom Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation and author of the recently released book, Brutal War, Jungle Fighting in Papua New Guinea, 1942. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, so it's interesting how they lie. So if it takes Sullivan's statement says, well, we went into Afghanistan to root out the people that did 9/11, and we accomplished that. Well, that's true. But that's not why we stayed in Afghanistan for 20 years. We stayed in Afghanistan for 20 years for two reasons. One is we knew that if we left, it could very well collapse and become the Wild West again, and you would get another terrorist Disneyland, just like we had in Afghanistan before, and like we had after Obama left Iraq, and like we had in Libya, and that was a risk not worth taking. The other reason why we stayed is a stable Afghanistan demonstrably contributed to a stable South Asia. That was good for the United States. You have nuclear Pakistan, nuclear India. You don't want them going after each other. You want India to be prosperous and peaceful and focused on dealing with China. So there are good reasons why we stayed for 20 years and why we continued to stay. And the cost of staying was not fighting endless wars. We had 2,500 soldiers who were not fighting. We were spending less in a year than we used to spend in a week. So it was a very sustainable situation. And those 2,500 soldiers were clearly a deterrent to a Taliban invasion, as we see, because as soon as they left, the Taliban invaded. So Sullivan's statement is utterly fatuous. The president's statement is utterly fatuous. Yeah, intelligence guys don't guarantee you what's going to happen. They don't have crystal balls. They don't tell you, oh, yeah, the day you leave, the Taliban are going to invade. But what they clearly did tell you, and the military told them, and the Trump guys told them, because I've talked to people who actually know what Biden was briefed by the outgoing president, was this is a very likely outcome, a very possible outcome. And that's exactly what unfolded. So to say, well, nobody predicted this, is like a 12-year-old could have predicted this, what could well have happened. And the reason is, yeah, there were 300,000 troops there, but what 2,500 troops represented was America was going to continue to provide logistical support. We were going to continue to provide air support. There was every expectation that the current situation would be the same. As soon as America said, all that's up for grabs now because we're leaving, not the military, but all the provincial leaders, the tribal leaders, the political leaders, they started wondering, how do I protect myself now that the Americans are gone? And they all started cutting deal with the Taliban, which is why the Taliban didn't have a military victory here. They didn't defeat the Afghan army in the field. The Afghan army just didn't fight, and they didn't fight because their political leaders just said, we're going to have a bloodbath here, and nobody's going to backstop us in fighting this bloodbath. So we have to worry about the future of our family and our children. So, so technically they're not lies, but they're lies. They lied to the American people, and then they did everything possible to blame somebody else for this catastrophic failure other than them.
All right. So, I mean, obviously there should have been a better contingency plan in place to get our fellow Americans out. What is the plan? Because President Biden said yesterday, or released a statement, that they'll be out by Tuesday.
Well, I mean, the reality is they will be out as long as the airport remains open and planes can fly in and fly out. But again, what you've done is kind of put yourself in the fate of the Taliban. I mean, you can hold the airport likely with 6,000 troops, but if the Taliban starts shooting at planes and stuff and planes can't fly in and out, well, then you just got Dien Bien Phu. So now literally the question is will the Taliban let the Americans humiliatingly run away, or will they start doing like Iran did after the Iranian Revolution and start looking for hostage taking or other ways to embarrass Americans? it's pretty clear, I think, that the Biden team's plan was, we're giving the Taliban such a good deal here and let them take over the country. They will obviously let us walk away and leave before they do this, and then we can just say, well, it's not our fault. And if you're looking at this from the Taliban perspective, in the part of the world where honor is really about power, would you pass up a chance to humiliate the President of the United States? And the answer is, of course not. Now the issue is really, how much do they want to humiliate Biden?
Mm-hmm. Going back to the blame game that you were referencing, Stephen Hayes over at the Bulwark tweeted out, the Biden administration has failed miserably. It's inexcusable. But the Trump administration negotiations literally provided the Taliban with battlefield reinforcements. Among its many, many flaws, the deal required the Afghan government to release 5,000 Taliban prisoners. So, as some are suggesting, there's equal blame here, Trump and Biden.
I wouldn't say that. Look, I think releasing the 5,000 prisoners was a mistake. And I would say that the U.S. negotiations were perfect. But look, Trump demonstrated again and again it was a conditions-based negotiation. And if you remember correctly, for example, when the Taliban bombed Kabul, not only did he cut off negotiations, but he did a very aggressive retaliatory air campaign. The Taliban were afraid of Trump. If he had stayed, they wouldn't have risked the invasion. I think that's pretty clear. And here's the thing: is Trump, he's not going to allow himself or America to be humiliated by the Taliban. Anybody that thinks that he would stand by and just watch this, much in the way Soleimani was attacking Americans in Iraq, then think that Trump would not take a stand. Come on, that's just ignorant.
And that was the point that actually Representative McCall made in terms of this hypothetical. And McCall, not a consistent defender of Trump or the Trump administration either, even though he was a Republican. So he essentially made the same point that you made. The other point made by the Wall Street Journal on this topic of the blame game and pretending this is just two administrations rather than Joe Biden being, present for 11 of these 21 years or 20 years, just about. Right. But the Wall Street Journal, he spent 7 months overturning one Trump policy after another, foreign and domestic, yet now he claims the Afghan policy is the one he could do nothing about. He's presenting a false choice. It's as if Winston Churchill, with his troops surrounded at Dunkirk, had declared Neville Chamberlain got him into this mess, and the British had already fought too many wars on the continent. I like that Chamberlain-Churchill comparison, too.
Look, here's what really ought to scare people, which is this is exactly the same foreign policy that the U.S. did in Iraq under Obama, which is having achieved a stable Iraq, he just said, okay, we're leaving, and pulled away the safety net, and we got ISIS. It's exactly the same policy that Obama pursued in Libya, which is, after the revolution, we're leading from behind, we're not doing anything, and we got Benghazi. It's similar to what he did in Syria with the Red Line. You have a consistent pattern of foreign policy decision-making here, and it's exactly the same in the Biden administration, which shouldn't surprise people because it's exactly the same people running government. So you have a pattern of governance on the part of these individuals that are willing to take enormous risks and just walk away from dangerous situations. And then the response when horrible things happen is to blame other people, ignore responsibility, and be like a deer in the headlights and not have an effective response to the crisis. Every bad guy in the world have watched Obama for 8 years. They know exactly the kind of decision-making they're going to get in the Biden administration, and they see it validated here in Afghanistan. What do you think they're going to do when they're planning what they're going to do in the future?
Lieutenant Colonel, we're just learning some breaking news. U.S. temporarily suspends air operations at the Kabul airport. That's coming down right now.
This could be incredibly tragic. I mean, if the Taliban shut down air travel, essentially you've got Dien Bien Phu in the middle of Kabul. And for people that don't know, Dien Bien Phu was a French stronghold in Vietnam, and it was surrounded by the communists, and they bombed the guys into oblivion.
And so you were sort of speaking to this, but before we get to what this looks like or what signals this sends to China and Russia, What about the future of Afghanistan under the Taliban? What does that look like? The same as it looked before 2001?
Yeah, I mean, why would you expect a different behavior on the part of the Taliban? And everything just gets harder. I mean, part of the reason why we stayed in Afghanistan is we had such great situational awareness that even if we couldn't control the entire country, we could easily prevent terrorist groups from getting sanctuaries and popping up again. Now we're over the horizon, and every time we go in there, we're going to go with less knowledge. It's going to be riskier, and put more Americans at risk. And if we don't, try to go in and weed the garden, what you're going to wind up is right back where we were with ISIS. And it has global rippling effects, right? This is what feeds the narrative. America is a paper tiger. We can go after them. They won't defend themselves. That's why Obama tried 9/11. That's why 30,000 plus foreign fighters flooded in to support ISIS. This is advertising, much in the way Biden's weakness advertised for tens of thousands of more illegal immigrants to come across the border. We're literally organizing an advertising campaign for Islamist terrorists to rise up again and strike the United States.
So girls are not going to be able to go to school anymore, and women can't shop or drive cars. Is that it's going to go back to all of that?
Well, if they keep their heads.
Yeah, right.
Oh, boy.
Andrew Mikta, writing, who's the Dean of College of International Security Studies at the George C. Marshall European Center for Security Studies, he wrote about this, saying the following: "The winding down of America's war in Afghanistan should serve as a wake-up call for all our policy elites to abandon fashionable post-Cold War shibboleths about institutions trumping culture and history that have shaped our strategic decisions since." He goes, just one more. He goes, "As Afghanistan implodes, such flawed assumptions need to be fully owned by those who constructed and sustained this ideologically laden strategic framework."
Look, we live in a hard power world. The bad guys don't care about children in school or pride flags or Equity Week or whatever. They look at the United States and they say, can they stop me? And if they can't, they don't stop. That's what this is all about. If you don't have the demonstrated will and ability to protect your interests, people will walk in and take it away from you. We saw it happen for 8 years under Obama. Never really happened under Trump because Trump demonstrated the resolve. I mean, look, I'm not pro-Trump. I'm just stating what factual history says. Ronald Reagan fought two little tiny itty wars, and nobody messed with the United States. Donald Trump never started a war, and he certainly didn't end any humiliating defeats. And it was because people feared him.
Can we stop the Taliban? Can we stop Afghanistan from being a haven for terrorism? Should we be more surgical than we were?
Sure. I mean, look, we rolled. I mean, from a military standpoint, this is not a heavy lift. The Taliban didn't have any military victories in Afghanistan. Basically, the Afghan military surrendered, and they surrendered because they said, "Well, who is going to have our back if we're going to be fighting these guys forever?" And the answer is if the Americans aren't going to be there, then we have to worry about our tribes and our children and our wives. So, but we could go in and roll the Taliban up again in 5 minutes, and we could. But this administration is not going to do that.
But I mean, but just thinking about the last 20 years, I mean, we took out 51,000 Taliban soldiers, terrorists, and they just make more. So I mean,
but here's the point: is we got under Trump. Again, just a fact, we got to the point of minimum deterrence with 2,500 troops that were not doing any fighting whatsoever, and spending less in Afghanistan in a year than we used to spend in a week under Obama. We had cowed the Taliban from taking over the country. You convinced me that was an expense that wasn't worth paying.
I understand that, and I think that's pretty persuasive, and probably would have been persuasive to Trump if he had been in this situation and seen what if the Taliban had done what they have done over the last couple of months since the Biden administration announcement, which probably they wouldn't have because, as you say, they have a different understanding of a different president. But I'm just thinking about 20 years, and I mean this was forgotten, this country, by most people 10 years ago, maybe longer, and through 4 presidents. What's the top line takeaway for America and our ability?
You know why Americans forgot about it and didn't care anymore? Because they could sleep safely in their bed at night. And this is where I think Biden made a big mistake. Lying to the American people, humiliating the American people. He thought because Americans were so blasé about Afghanistan, they just didn't care. And Americans don't really care about foreign policy until they're humiliated and lied to, and they see that this can come home and hurt them in their own communities. Then they get really angry. And that's why you've seen this incredible sense of outrage against this president, because he presumed that Americans were just going to roll over and take this. They didn't roll over and take Vietnam. I mean, or the hostage-taking embassy in Iran. There's a reason why Ronald Reagan got voted into office. Americans were tired of being a patsy. And I think that, Americans are not happy about being lied to. I don't think they're happy about being humiliated. I don't think they're happy about our having to bear responsibility for a horrific human rights catastrophe that's going to happen in Afghanistan. I don't think they're proud of any of that. It's just like, not to make a metaphor, but why were they so disappointed in the women's soccer team in the Olympics? It wasn't just that they lost. It's just that they were embarrassing, and they embarrassed us. Americans don't like to be embarrassed. I mean, they don't like to be humiliated, and they certainly don't like to have to worry about another 9/11. I think it's a problem for the administration.
He is Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Heritage Foundation, the book, Brutal Wars, Jungle Fighting in Papua New Guinea. Jim, thanks as always.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line. Coming up on Chicago's Morning Answer.
Still looking for Illinois' Howard Rourke at 7:37.
But now let's head into that newsroom and welcome back Mike Scott. I hope you had a nice few days off.
We did. Thank you. 67 degrees.